Hello, my name is Ihor Havryshchak. This is a traditional YouTube platform of Channel 24. It is with great pleasure that I introduce our regular guest. These are a political scientist from the United States of America who has already returned from Europe to USA, and Ramiz Yunus, a former general of the Azerbaijani government. Mr. Yunus, hello. Hello, dear Ihor. Thank you for the invitation. Greetings to all of our esteemed audiences. I am glad to see you in good health. I already welcome you from America, as you rightly noted, and glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Mr. Yunus, of course, we will also discuss what is happening in Kursk, the Kursk region of the Russian Federation, how the United States of America is reacting to this, what is happening in the United States of America, and, of course, the South Caucasus. Mr. Yunus, first of all, of course, Kursk. The Kursk operation, since our last conversation, has been officially recognized as an operation of the armed forces of Ukraine. Temporary control has been established over these territories. It has been officially stated that Ukraine does not claim the territories of other countries, and all conventions are observed. However, in the context of the war, its nature has changed. If earlier it was waged only on the territory of Ukraine, now it has also affected the territory of the aggressor country that attacked our country. You know, this war has changed sporadically over these 2.5 years, and it has influenced the entire world politics to one degree or another. All the countries that were involved reacted to this in one way or another. Here we can recall the initial stage of the war, the failed so-called blitzkrieg, and how you managed to resist at the very beginning of the conflict. Here we should mention both your success in the Kherson direction and your success in the Kharkov direction. And so, against the background of a certain stagnation, so to speak, of the front, when there were only battles of local and local significance, the front stabilized. And against this background, such a sharp success of the Ukrainian armed forces, which, as you rightly noted, is taking place on the internationally recognized territory of Russia, and not as it happened before, with drone attacks or sorties by certain military formations. This is a full-scale operation, in which, according to some reports, about 10,000 regular armed forces of Ukraine are involved. And today, the Ukrainian armed forces reportedly control an area of about 1,000 square meters. There is already talk that military commandants' offices will be created. In general, everything that you had to go through yourself. And, of course, there are several aspects that are important to note. This is in addition to the ideological, informational, so to speak, purely psychological moment, which affects both Ukrainian society and Russian society, depending on the successes and failures of one side or the other. It is important to note here both political and military technical aspects. Politically, this affects the perception of the situation in the world. Everyone is beginning to confidently say that Ukraine has found an antidote that will help it calmly come to the negotiating table. These negotiations must begin sooner or later, because any war ends at the negotiating table. But only when one of the parties has a strong position, that is, from a position of strength. Because everyone understands that there can be no draw in this war and one of the sides must have a strong side. And given that in this situation, as part of this counteroffensive, neither Russia nor Ukraine deviates from their stated goals and established bars, that is, the Ukrainian side, according to the decree of President Zelenskyy, does not consider negotiations with the aggressor, and the Russian side proposes to start negotiations only on the new conditions that have developed in the current situation. And given that the positions of the parties are diametrically opposed, everyone, including Ukraine, Russia and the international community, understands the impossibility of any negotiations in the current conditions. Therefore, all the conversations that have been held on this topic over the past 2.5 years, I have regularly noted as a guest on various channels, are unfounded. I emphasize that they are still unfounded, because there are several points. First, until the presidential elections in the United States are over, no negotiations should be expected. The fact that they can be expected next year can simply be said or assumed on this topic. Again, this will depend on the success of Ukraine's counteroffensive. If it turns out to be successful, the agenda of the negotiations will change. It will be about the exchange of territories. Then Ukraine will be able to clearly indicate that, for example, so many thousands of square kilometers are occupied by Russia, which means that the same number of square kilometers is occupied by Ukraine, and this will be the subject of negotiations. Naturally, this is what Russia does not want, and this is what Ukraine would like in this situation, and it could help. Therefore, Ukraine's statement that it does not need foreign territory, but is required only to ensure the security of border areas, can serve as the very card in possible negotiations. These negotiations may begin sooner or later at the initiative of major countries such as China and the United States of America, which will be able to put pressure on the Russian side, arguing that there are no other options. Because Ukraine will never go for the option that Russia proposes. And the option that Ukraine offers before the current conditions, in the conditions of Russian success and the ability to hold the occupied territories, will not suit Russia, so it needs to be changed. Therefore, this counteroffensive undertaken by Ukraine clearly speaks to this. To what extent Ukraine will be able to strengthen this groundwork, expand the zone of approaching with strong positions, that is, change the situation on the battlefield and politically for the future, we can only judge in the future. But judging by the reaction of the White House and key allies in Europe, I mean Ukraine's allies, we can conclude that all this has been agreed with the White House. Statement by Joe Biden the day before yesterday. I personally listened to his press conference before he boarded a helicopter from the White House, where he told reporters that from the first day of the start of this operation, he had been closely following everything that was happening. 24 hours a day we were in direct contact with the military political leadership of Ukraine, and every 5 hours I received a report from my closest aides. He says that I will not tell you anything more on this subject. But there is no need to say more here, because it is openly said that President Biden personally and his team were aware of everything that was doing in Ukraine. Another thing is when it began, contact, and where this idea came from. I think that the idea arose in the minds of the Ukrainian military political leadership, and after the preparation of the entire operation, with the approval of Washington, it was implemented. The positive information background and statements from the West, primarily from Washington, are clear evidence of this. We have not heard any condemnation from key allies, and there have been no negative assessments from the G7 either. The meeting of the United Nations Security Council, convened by Russia, did not receive understanding from Ukraine's key allies. We conclude that this offensive is a strategic decision, and, in my opinion, this decision will not be limited to the Kursk region alone, since its capture is not enough to significantly strengthen the position of Ukraine. I will give a pure examination, without any evaluative moments. This will look more objective. And there should be no hat and throwing, nothing. Here we need to look at the possibilities of Ukraine's position and the possibilities of Russia's position. In this case, I am surprised, of course, as well as many experts, by Russia's reaction to this counteroffensive. They do not declare war, do not declare mobilization, and they try to solve it somehow, and even by non-standard methods. That is, coordination is not carried out by the General Staff of the Ministry of Defense, but by the FSB and special services. And they are involved in coordination with completely different people who, according to their rank, should be engaged in this. And this does not promise any prospects in this situation for Russia, as far as I understand. In order to remedy the situation, they will probably need to transfer forces from other directions. And that's what they don't want to do, as I understand it. And therefore we see a certain success for Ukraine. How much Ukraine will be able to strengthen it and expand this bridgehead, we can say in the near future. You just need to keep a close eye on this. But as far as I understand, it was a strategic decision, and not a local success, which Ukraine simply made and will then retreat. For the sake of this, it would not be worth starting all this. Therefore, as I understand it, this is all quite serious, and this radically changes the picture of military operations, the picture and prospects of this war. And I think the attitude of the United States of America and the current administration is so positive. This suggests that the White House, on the eve of the election campaign, is very much counting on a certain success that they could present to their voters here. Because there is no success in the external arena. Today, August 14th, I emphasize, today is the day of the shameful withdrawal. 3 years ago from Afghanistan. Afghanistan celebrates this date today. Look at the footage shown by all the well-known TV channels, including American ones. This is used, in particular, by Republicans, who present the situation as a shame for Biden and his team. Therefore, the Middle East situation remains uncertain, neither war nor peace, especially given the position of Netanyahu, who does not support the current administration. Therefore, the only place that can have any success can be just the Russian-Ukrainian direction. And so I always emphasize that before the end of the year, before the end of the presidential campaign, we will see more positive steps from the current administration. This applies both to the support of the current operation and to the military technical supplies necessary to achieve success. Here, of course, I would add the events in the South Caucasus, which the US administration is also very interested in. But I hope that we will be able to return to this in another part of our conversation today. Another point. Summarizing everything I wanted to say about the reaction of the West and, first of all, the United States of America to the Kursk operation, I believe that this operation will radically change the entire nature of the war and its prospects. The West, and especially the United States, has a deep interest in this. The West understood that the situation was a deadlock and there were no possible negotiations here. And here there is hope that there is an opportunity for a strong position of the same Ukraine. Because with a different position, Ukraine is on the brink and Ukraine has nowhere to retreat. And therefore, Ukraine has never agreed to these negotiations, no matter who puts pressure on Ukraine. In the current situation, if Ukraine achieves significant success and gets the opportunity to exchange occupied territories, this will be a strong position for Ukraine. After that, the country will be able to present this issue to its society as a significant achievement. The problem is primarily here in Russia, not in Ukraine. Because then the question arises, not only did you put a huge number of people under the occupation of certain territories of Ukraine, you failed to keep the primordially Russian territories according to internationally recognized laws. That is, it hits public opinion in Russia in both ways. But we understand that during all this time of this war and recent years, it seems as if the Kremlin has managed, by tightening the screws, to restrain this state of mind, but, as you understand, and with any tightening of the screws, the thread can come off someday. Therefore, the situation today is very tense. I mean both the war in technical terms, and very, which is very important, in political terms. Therefore, this must be understood. There will be a lot of misinformation. There will be a lot of different throws that we will hear from different sides. But I would not trust all this talk, and first of all I would listen only to officials, as well as to experts who really have complete information. You see how I am cautious about commenting on the military unit, because I also do not have all the information about what is happening. As an observer, understanding where and why this is happening, I see that Ukraine today is strengthening its negotiating position for the prospect of 2025. I emphasize, it is 2025, since a change of power in the White House is possible. As you can imagine, the policy of Donald Trump and his vice president regarding this war is not hidden. However, in order for Ukraine to have leverage and be able to defend itself effectively, it needs to strengthen its position. Therefore, over these 6 months, I have no doubt, the current administration and its allies in Europe will do everything to ensure that Ukraine has a strong position. That is why I see this positive and not an ounce of condemnation from the Western allies. As for permission to hit or not to beat, this is again a speculative topic that no one will ever tell you the truth. If they coordinate all this, it means that if necessary, it will be applied. And if this is not necessary, then it will not be applied. No one will tell you that we are coordinating this. Because, mind you, today, when we look at the entire Russian information machine, you see how they regularly say that this is the United States of America, this is NATO, all this is with permission. That is, they are also at war with NATO. It is as if Ukraine is not present here. Therefore, once again they try not to say anything on this topic. Well, this is all an information war. And how it really happens, there will be speculation. The main thing is that we see the result. The result suggests that Ukraine has advanced deep into Russian territory, into sovereign Russian territory. Ukraine already controls a certain part, and Ukraine seems to be increasing this advantage, despite the fact that every day we hear that Russia, it says, has captured and liberated a lot of things. True, no one knows, because the fog of war, it has always been the fog of war. But, judging by the so-called certain insider information, we can conclude that today Russia is going through a very difficult period, and, as I understand it, Ukraine and its allies will increase their advantages. This is my vision of the situation, without excessive optimism and propaganda, strictly objective. I try to avoid jingoism and take into account the capabilities of Russia that it can use today. It's just strange why Russia has not yet fully used this. One gets the impression that Russia itself would like Ukraine to seize a certain territory. Here I will express this idea. This is, of course, a red-letter thought, but it begs the question, if Russia is allowing Ukraine to carry out these operations and not taking logical steps such as declaring war, mobilizing and trying to hold on to the Kursk region, then perhaps they are seeking negotiations. Perhaps Russia realizes that without negotiations it cannot sustain this war in the long term. Maybe this is how Russia creates such an impression. That is, in principle, this also suggests itself. But this, as I understand it, is shooting yourself in the foot, because this situation can be uncontrolled. Because I do not think that Ukraine will stop at only the Kursk region. There is both the Belgorod region and the Kursk nuclear power plant, which can become a bargaining chip for the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. After that, as you understand, F-16s are already flying, and the Crimean Bridge and other objects can also become a target. So I don't think that Russia will have many options to come to any possible negotiations. The current escalation in the West, by the way, is taking place without nuclear rhetoric from Russia, which, of course, is strange. And note what a calm reaction from the same Russia. There are a lot of questions that need to be answered, but in any case, I think that in the next few months we will live through very important moments of this war. And I think that's all, everything that we're seeing, directly related to the US presidential choice. I personally see it this way. And by the way, we can already move on to the topic of the United States of America, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. But there was information, which, of course, is reported by the media, that the Ukrainian authorities are negotiating with the White House on the alleged permission to strike at the territory of the Russian Federation without restrictions. First of all, we remember the missiles from the collective peacekeeping forces. And today there was literally information in Politico that allegedly the United States is ready to transfer to Ukraine missiles up to F-16, which we already have, with a range of 360 kilometers. This is the AGM-158. But it is not important, it is not important to pronounce the figures, because this is a military theme. What am I leading to? An entry into the territory of the Russian Federation may push the White House to decide that the nuclear doctrine may not have worked, and that the invasion of Russian territory, which has been going on for the second week, requires a revision of approaches. Can the White House exhale and, at the end of Biden's term, make a grand gesture by allowing the use of weapons for the full range? I have recently visited several countries, including my native Azerbaijan, where I participated in a large international forum in Karabakh and interacted with numerous professional experts and high-level politicians both in Europe and in Azerbaijan. And I'll tell you honestly, none of them even suggests the beginning of a nuclear catastrophe and World War III. Everyone reacts very calmly, including to the Middle East issue and to a possible confrontation between Israel and Iran, including on the nuclear issue. What am I driving at? My point is that usually this nuclear topic appeared in the information plane from the first day of this war, because Russia threw it there, thereby frightening ordinary people in the West. And at the initial stage, it worked. But so far it has not come to certain messages not only from the United States and its allies, I mean from Great Britain, from France, I mean nuclear powers, but when China and India intervened in this matter. And after that, as you remember, the nuclear territory quietly came to naught, even after the capture of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And such a calm reaction to the Ukrainian counteroffensive in the Kursk direction, which runs counter to the nuclear doctrine, the Russian nuclear doctrine, is another confirmation of this. I would recall that the White House and the Kremlin competently used the so-called exchange of Krasikov for the so-called Russian opposition. I emphasize the so-called because, from my point of view, they are not real oppositionists, but represent the same political system that is observed in Russia. They just had a different role, and now they are playing a new role, which was the reason for their exchange. And that is why today they are being made into soap bubbles in the context of Ukraine and the Ukrainian war. They have no influence on these events. Moreover, they are enemies not only of Ukraine, but also of all other former post-Soviet countries, which Russia looks at as a zone of its strategic interests, since they are all imperialists. But where am I leading this? I am leading to the fact that it was Russia and Washington, and they managed to make it so that Germany also joined, because the main issue was Germany, because Krasikov was in Germany. It was for this reason that Russia urgently found 5 Germans on the territory of Russia. Many do not know about this, and who were also arrested. It's just that we haven't heard much about them in the media, we haven't talked about them. But it was these 5 German citizens who were presented to Scholz as a way for him to sell it to his German society. when they began to run over him about why he released the killer of Krasakov. And this was played, as you understand, behind the scenes quietly by the Kremlin and the White House. The Kremlin and the White House have excellent contacts on this issue. If the Kremlin and the White House have fairly normal contacts on the Middle East problem, not to escalate in relations between Israel and Iran, we see this. I also recall the April events, when Iran allegedly responded to Israel, more than 300 missiles that flew there to no avail, and the fact that Iran is not escalating the situation today after the assassination of Ismail Khani is also clear evidence of this. I want to emphasize that on many issues, the United States of America and the Kremlin have a certain understanding and contacts. Moreover, the Kremlin is curtsying a few times, counting on the fact that Donald Trump may not win. After Joe Biden withdrew his candidacy, and the Democrats nominated Kamala Harris, her candidacy is being actively promoted. Moreover, she was appointed a strong candidate for vice president, who significantly surpasses in political experience a little-known young man who is only 40 years old and who has been in big politics for only 2 years. He has been working as a senator for only 2 years and is a personal friend of Donald Trump's son, whom Trump himself appointed to this position. Therefore, a person who has neither the background of a governor nor diplomatic experience weakens the position of Donald Trump. If Trump had a more powerful nominee, such as Nikki Haley, who was ambassador to the United Nations and governor, it would greatly strengthen his position. Nikki Haley would have a serious background suitable for the role of vice president, and then president. All American presidents usually had to go this way. Therefore, Kamala Harris has more chances here, and this can be seen throughout America as well, and this is now very quietly beginning to be observed in these undecided states. And here it is very important to see how the debates, which are scheduled in just 2 to 3 weeks, will end. They will begin. The first debate between Harris and Trump will take place on September 10th, followed by a debate between vice presidential nominees Waltz and J.G. Vance on October 1st. And after that, it will be known who will win. But judging by the fact that Kamala Harris is gaining momentum today, the Democrats have much more money for the election campaign than Donald Trump. And the Kremlin cannot help but understand that Donald Trump's card may not work, so perhaps it is worth leaving the door open with the current administration. Kamala Harris, you can be sure, will not make any revolutionary changes in relation to Ukraine, the Middle East and the rest of the world, continuing the policy of Joe Biden, like the entire team. It's just that Biden was changed, because in the current situation, the party decided so. And since the party has decided, it means that Kamala Harris will comply with the party's decision. In America, after all, this is a systematic work. It will not go against the system. In America, neither she will go against the system, nor Nikki Haley, as you can see, went against the system and did not become sharply in opposition. In addition, Donald Trump, I think, will be offered some kind of position, if he wins, perhaps the Secretary of State or National Security Assistant. That is, what I am saying is that the Kremlin today is leaving its doors open both for Washington and in the Russian-Ukrainian direction. That is, I find a common language with you on the Iranian topic, agree to the exchange of prisoners and do what you want. That is, I support your image in the presidential election, you can sell it to your audience. That is, your success that you returned American citizens, your success that you did not allow an escalation in the Middle East, you defended Israel, you sent an armada there, you sent destroyers there, a nuclear submarine. That is, all this can be presented to your audience as an additional confirmation of your positions. And then there is the Kursk direction, success, all these moments. Well, then let's start negotiations, and let's start these negotiations in 2025. Well, you can assume so, of course, you can assume. Logical. That is, Russia's actions suggest this, you see. Because if Russia had declared war, mobilized and done everything to push Ukraine back from the Kursk direction in a matter of days, then we could talk about a different situation. A strange situation, and the fact that this was entrusted to the special services, and not to the regular troops, also causes some thoughts. Maybe one more question. Perhaps the declaration of war and mobilization is related to the reaction in Dagestan and Chechnya, where the situation may be unstable. As you understand, not everything is so stable for Russia in national entities. Perhaps they would not like to escalate the internal political situation in the country itself. However, with this offensive, Ukraine has changed the agenda not only for itself, but also for Russia. Russia appears to be acting on an emergency basis. Thank you very much for talking about the US attitude to the Kursk operation. And since we announced at the beginning of our conversation, I would like to talk about a topic that is very close to you. Probably the closest to this is the South Caucasus. What I have read and tried to understand shows that there are some movements in the relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan in their agreements, although not everything is taken into account. And, of course, Putin's announced visit to Azerbaijan on August 19th. Yes, of course, very serious events are also taking place in the South Caucasus, and they cannot be considered outside the context of what is happening in the Russian-Ukrainian direction and in the Middle East. Because in fact, big tectonic events are taking place, and all the main players on the planet are involved in all these processes, both in the South Caucasus and in the Middle East, and in the Russian-Ukrainian direction, the United States of America, the European Union, China and Russia. Therefore, we need to closely monitor all these areas, and depending on the success and failure of the main players, we will be able to draw conclusions about where this will weaken the position of one country, and where it will strengthen another, and why this country works in a particular geography in this or that way. If we talk about the United States of America, then, of course, they do not want an escalation in any region. They need to calmly conduct the elections to the end, meaning the current administration. As for the relations between Azerbaijan and Armenia in the South Caucasus, we have already discussed this topic a lot. Today, the situation with the peace talks, which are taking place dynamically and for quite a long time, indicates that 80 to 90% of the text has been agreed. Here the question arises, what text? Because everyone is discussing a peace treaty between Azerbaijan and Armenia, but for a peace agreement, Azerbaijan at the very beginning, back in 2021 after the war, voiced 5 principles. And these 5 principles are based on the Charter of the United Nations. Known and accepted principles, such as the recognition of sovereignty and territorial integrity, ensuring open communications, delimitation and demarcation, and so on. These are the main principles that are basic. It seems that we have to return to these basic principles, because on many issues that are the subject of negotiations, Armenia and the forces behind it seem to slow down the process. I will explain the situation. What is the situation? The status quo has changed. Azerbaijan has liberated Karabakh, restored sovereignty, territorial union, liberated 7 districts. Azerbaijan is located on the conditional border with Armenia. We have no border, no delimitation, no demarcation. The only thing that binds Armenia to the OSCE Minsk group today is that one of the members of the group, Russia, is still in the process as so-called peacekeepers. But, as you know, since last year, Russian peacekeepers have no longer been on the territory of Azerbaijan. That is, they have fulfilled their function, or rather, since this year, to be more precise, right? Here, they have fulfilled their function, they are no longer there. And since they are no longer there, it means that there is no OSCE Minsk group, which was attended by Russia, France and the United States of America. And Azerbaijan, as one condition, says that we must jointly come out and say that the OSCE Minsk group should go down in history. Armenia is against this. This once again emphasizes that Armenia strives to maintain the relevance of the Nagorno-Karabakh topic, while the Karabakh region is considered part of Azerbaijan. Because since Karabakh has been liberated, the topic of Karabakh is closed. Why do we need the CFE Minsk group? This is the issue that Azerbaijan demands to coordinate with Armenia. Armenia has not yet given an answer to this question. However, the more important issue that Azerbaijan poses is the demand to change the legislation of Armenia, including the constitution, as well as the preamble and declaration to it, where 30 years ago, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Armenia's position was clearly enshrined. The constitution stated that Nagorno-Karabakh is an integral part of Armenia. Do you understand how Azerbaijan can sign a peace treaty with Armenia if Pashinyan leaves tomorrow and his successor declares that this is contrary to the constitution? Well, of course, Pashinyan first planned to quickly resolve the issue, but then came to the conclusion that this was unrealistic. Today he is going to change the constitution in its entirety, and after that a referendum will be held, which will take a couple of years. Pashinyan said that the whole process will drag on until 2026-2027. At this time, Azerbaijan demands a decision on communication, since the only documented agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia concerns the opening of the Zangezur corridor. But Armenia is also against this. If Armenia opposes this, then all other communications will also be closed. Because if Armenia does not open the Zangezur corridor, as agreed, then Azerbaijan will not open what Armenia wants today and what Armenia's allies in Europe and the United States of America are promoting. I mean the roads through Kazakh in Jevan and Julva. And look at the impasse in which Armenia finds itself today. Here is the latest statement that happened. Azerbaijan announced that we are removing this package with these communications. We leave it for the time when Armenia is ready for this. As my friend, former aide to the president of Azerbaijan Eldar Namazov said, we take this key to all this and put it in our pocket. And Armenia remains in a logistical impasse. I emphasize what a logistical impasse is. Roads through Kazakh in Jevan and Julva, which overlooks Iran. And, in addition, the road through the territory of Iran from this side of the Zangezur corridor through the territory of Aras. Azerbaijan controls all these roads in this regard. And Armenia does not open the Zangezur corridor. Armenia remains deadlocked. You said that the president of Russia is coming to Baku. I emphasized to you. And before that, Sergei Shoigu, the former Minister of Defense, came to Baku. Why did Sergei Shoigu come? Who came with him to the company? Igor Levitin came. He was the Minister of Transport of Russia for 10 years. Today he is the assistant to the President of Russia for communications. He was in Iran. Iran has broken down on this topic, I mean the north-south flow. Russia, Azerbaijan, Iran. Iran did not want to open the Astara-Rasht road with access to the Indian Ocean there. That is, this is the very flow. And Iran did not want Armenia to open the Zangezur corridor. And Iran, recently Pashinyan, when he was at the inauguration of the new president in Iran, the Iranian leader told Pashinyan, the Zangezur corridor is not in the interests of Armenia. The Zangezur corridor is not in the interests of Armenia, and Iran opens a corridor from this side, the Aras corridor together with Azerbaijan, through the territory of Iran, through Azerbaijan, again reaching the same Nakhichevan. As a result, what about Armenia? There is no project left in Armenia. The north-south is opening, Armenia is also absent. Kazakh and in Jevan, Armenia is not present there, the road is not opened. In addition, Azerbaijan has agreements with China and the European Union. The European Union has already allocated $10 billion for the Trans-Caspian Middle Corridor, which will go through China, Central Asia, the Caspian Sea and Azerbaijan. The road to Baku, Tbilisi-Kars is already ready and will be modernized with the support of China and the European Union. And draw a conclusion. From east to west, the road goes from China to the European Union through Azerbaijan, and from the north through Russia and Iran. A road passes through Iran to Nakhichevan, which then leads to Turkey. Armenia is in a logistical impasse. Armenia has only one highway through Megri, leading to Iran. And on the other hand, there is Georgia, strategic partner of Azerbaijan and Turkey. And all this is so that within 1, 2 or 3 years Armenia will be able to solve problems with its legislation. And where, in what condition Armenia finds itself. And against this background, on the European Union and the policy of the United States of America. Here the question arises, yes, what are you trying to achieve? On the one hand, you seek to weaken Russia. On the other hand, you throw Armenia into the arms of the same Russia. Note that the trade turnover between Russia and Armenia today, I mean over these 2.5 years of Russia's aggression against Ukraine, has grown by about 8.5 billion. By the end of the year, it will be 17 billion. Just imagine what flows are flowing. These bypasses through the territory of Armenia, and not through the territory of Georgia or the territory of Azerbaijan. How does the West react to this? No how. They turn a blind eye to this. In other words, despite all this, Armenia is considered an aggressor, yes, as it were, yes, and according to all international documents. The aggressor was Japan in World War II, the aggressor was Germany in World War II, and the aggressor was Iraq. What questions were applied to the aggressors? Issues of militarization. They made sure that they would not be supplied with certain weapons. Look at what Europe and certain circles in the United States are doing today. They declare a program of peace, and under this program of peace, they militarize this Armenia. What can this lead to? And what is Azerbaijan's policy? Equidistant. You see, China and the European Union are engaged in logistics here, and Russia and Iran are engaged in logistics here. The question arises, why should Azerbaijan behave in this situation today? Azerbaijan has a policy of neutrality. Azerbaijan does not allow anyone to use its territory against its neighbors. Not against Iran, not against Russia, not against Georgia, not against Turkey. The only thing is that we had a war with Armenia. Therefore, Azerbaijan is equidistant from all these. As you understand, Russia is our neighbor to the north, and Iran is to the south. What should Azerbaijan do in this situation? If the American fleet, Pacific or otherwise, were in the Caspian Sea and defended Azerbaijan, then we could calmly react and somehow block or say that we do not want that road or this road. And we have some options. Therefore, Azerbaijan behaves quite dynamically both with its northern neighbor, with its southern neighbor, and with China. And quite excellent relations with the countries of Central Asia and a strategic partnership with the same European Union. There is only one problem, Armenia. And this Armenia, look at how they receive it in the West today. It is a member of the CSTO to this day, a Russian military base. The border with Turkey, the border with Iran are guarded by them. And today in this Sarajevo region, look at who is not there. The Americans are there, the French are there, the European Union is there, Iran is there, Russia is there. What are you cooking there? Are you making a new Syria out of Armenia? Against whom? Against Azerbaijan? And why do you need it? That is, when you hear all this, and then we hear anti-Azerbaijani talk in the Western media after the Second Karabakh War. Recently, remember, I even talked on your channel about the Russian oligarch of Armenian origin, Ruben Vardanyan, who is now in an Azerbaijani prison. Remember, dear, how we talked with you. He is the former prime minister of the so-called Karabakh. This is the same Russian oligarch who was involved in money laundering and financing the massacre in the Donbass. And this oligarch, who is now in an Azerbaijani prison along with 22 other separatists, the leaders of this Karabakh entity, who supports them today in the West. Samantha Power, USID, and they all represent him today as a human rights activist. Just as these Russian liberal oppositionists are being turned into bubbles today by Yulia Navalnaya, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, Yashin, Kara-Murza and all those who have always opposed the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan and Georgia, and called Crimea a sandwich. These are all people, and look at the double attitude towards them in the West. Depending on the situation they need. And it can be Georgia, it can be Ukraine, it can be Azerbaijan. Even Georgia, for example, which saw such duplicity, today has such bad relations. And Saakashvili is still in prison, who has done so much for them. Why am I telling you everything in such detail? I want you to understand how cynical the policy pursued by the West can sometimes be. I live in the West, so I understand how they do all this. If before we looked at them just with rose-colored glasses, today I am very glad that this is not the case in my native Azerbaijan. But, unfortunately, I saw a lot at the initial stage with you. You have today, you see, and your rose-colored glasses have quietly come off today. And what you are doing today in the Kursk direction or somewhere else, you should primarily base on your own interests, and not on what someone in the West may like. You will do it this way, and they will already join in your victory. Because if there is a defeat, they will be, well, that is, this is your defeat. And if there is a victory, they will join in your victory. I want you to understand how this Western machine sometimes hypocritically works in relation to the post-Soviet space. Because it is very important for them to regulate this type of conflict through management. And they are not interested in these conflicts ending so quickly. It is easier for them to make a deal with the same Kremlin behind your back, behind the back of Georgia, behind your back. This is how they went to this, so to speak, reset behind Georgia's back by 2008. What they did to you in 2014 is what they were going to do today. But you see, you have stubbornly refused, and now you are forcing people to recognize your success in the Kursk direction, not to condemn it, but on the contrary to support it. And the more you develop in this direction, the more they will support you. And, believe me, they are considered only by force. As they say in the East, only force is considered. But, believe me, in life they also consider only strength. And so you saw for yourself, yes, at the very beginning, how you were treated and how you are treated today, until we began to show these teeth. In other words, I am saying this because what is happening today in the South Caucasus in relations between Azerbaijan and Armenia, as well as the policy that we see on the part of the main players, raises a lot of questions. But Azerbaijan has nowhere to hurry. Azerbaijan has already taken everything, completely taken it, and calmly continues its logistics projects. The Zangezur corridor, which Azerbaijan needs, will be opened by Azerbaijan calmly, you can be sure. I say this publicly on the air. I have spoken publicly about the Karabakh conflict many times over the past 4 years. I have never lied to you. This is exactly the same. It is just that the turn has not come to this, because today it is not so relevant for us. We solve all other issues specifically. Armenia is still in a logistical impasse from the fact that we will not solve this issue today, but we will solve it later. Armenia will not gain anything from this, and we are quietly winning. We open the north-south road, open the Aras corridor, the same Zangezur, but from the Iranian side. In addition, we are blockading Julva, that is, the corridor through Julva is the only exit for Armenia to Iran, which is located in Nakhichevan, and we will not allow it to be opened. Nakhichevan for Armenia, which they want to open in Europe and the United States of America, will also be closed and will not work. What are the levers of influence on Azerbaijan? Only these stupid articles in the media in the West about poor separatists in prison being tortured, killed and treated badly. Go and see how well they live there, drink tea and testify. And soon there will be another Nuremberg trial on this matter. We just understand how the Western machine works, but it all comes to naught. It is just very important to decipher all this in this information war. You yourself have been going through this information war for many years and have noticed how strong Russia was at the very beginning. Then you recovered from the knockdown, intensified your information war, and now Russia has again intensified its information war in all directions. This is a very important component, and therefore Armenia and its allies in the West have always been very strong in the information war, especially here in the United States of America and in France. But times have already changed, because everything dictates, you will hear me, dear Ukrainians, everything dictates success on earth. Azerbaijan has success on the ground, and we are slowly but surely transferring this success to the information sphere. I just voiced all the problems that they want to create around us, but, as you can see, we are competently overcoming them, and Armenia remains in an impasse. And in the near future, I think, the Americans will try to create some kind of paper to sign before the end of the presidential campaign. Well, some ordinary paper, perhaps with general words, such as a protocol of intentions, containing the basic principles of a peace treaty between Azerbaijan and Armenia, in order to create the appearance. But, again, this is a problem for Armenia, because Pashinyan is afraid to go for it. Even if such a paper appears, it will finally confirm that the topic of Karabakh is gone forever. It is already gone completely. They just continue to discuss it in the information plane to one degree or another. Sometimes it does not pass in the Congress, then in the French Senate or in the European Parliament, or in the media, but slowly and surely this topic goes away, because everything dictates success on the ground. So, dear Ukrainians, you understand this. The more success you have on the ground, the more success there will be both on the negotiation platform and in the information space. And whether they want it or not, those in the West who today smile in your face, take a step forward, and then take 2 steps back, allowing or not allowing, are looking for any excuse to conclude a separate deal with the Kremlin behind your back. Remember this. Mr. Yunus, thank you very much for the conversation. Thank you very much for placing accents and not making it just a game of help the West, but for approaching the matter coolly. Thank you for helping, but we also defend not only Ukraine, but also the civilizational West. The fact that you say that everyone has their own interests and geographical interests should also be taken into account is very important. Thank you again for the conversation, and I hope that our viewers will listen carefully and understand more than before this conversation, than 40 to 50 minutes ago. Thank you very much. Thank you, see you, glory to Ukraine. Let me remind you that Ramiz Yunus, a political technologist from the United States of America, was with us. My name is Ihor Havryshchak. Please like, subscribe, share our conversation. I will see you on Channel 24.